Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Gina Douglas.
Howdy. My daddy was the sixth of 7 kids born to a Kentucky coal miner and his half-breed Cherokee wife. And Daddy was born cross-eyed, and there's no way they could afford a surgery to fix his eyes. But word was that they moved up to Detroit. Grandpa could work in the auto factory. UAW benefits would cover the whole family, and Daddy could get his surgery. So they decided that's what they was going to do, but before they left the hills, they made a family pact that they wasn't going to tell nobody that they was part Cherokee. Because these kids had taken too much hassle from the other hillbillies about being redskins and Injuns and people making the woo-woo-woo-woo at them. And they felt they could pass for white if nobody knowed otherwise. Plus, the oldest kids is getting to be marrying age and thinking about having their own kids, and they don't see no reason why their kids should have to grow up facing the same kind of bigotry they done. So they made this pact that they wasn't going to tell anybody, least of all their own kids, that we's part Cherokee. But when I was 8 years old, a spirit vision came to me and told me the truth of things, including that we were descended from a Cherokee shaman who escaped the Trail of Tears by running away to hide in the mountains. Memorial Day 2008, I was up in Manitou Springs, Colorado, just a few miles up Pikes Peak from Colorado Springs, where I was living at the time. Manitou is a tourist trap full of motels and esoteric stores selling stumps carved into bears and homemade jewelry. And I'd been up there several times over the years because it was easy to blend in. I'd been in most of the taverns, had a drink at the bar, used the ladies' room. In Colorado, it's black letter law that transgender people have the right to use the gender-segregated facility that matches their innate sense of gender identity. This day, when I need to pee, I'm near the edge of town, the roughest part, where there's a bar for the locals I ain't never been in, and there's no tourists there, there's just a couple motorcycles parked out front. Now, while I'm essentially passable, I'm also readable. Passable means that most people gender me as female without a second glance, but some people immediately know I wasn't born female, and anyone who looks closely can figure it out. I estimate that about 90% of people gender me as female, but there are certain situations where that percentage goes way down, like walking into a bar. When a woman walks into the bar, half the guys look at her and wonder what's the chance he could do her, and under that kind of scrutiny, my ratio is below 50-50. Now, sitting with his back to this particular bar like he owns a place is this fat, leathery Sons of Satan motorcycle guy. It is full leathers and colors on Memorial Day, and he's got nothing going for him but his colors and his bike, but he's checking out any chick who comes in the door for whether she likes that. He immediately reads me. And as I pass Fat Biker, it's an unwelcoming look on his face, to say the least, and the bartender don't look none too pleased neither. So I decided to dispense with ordering a drink and go straight through the ladies' room. Not because I was afraid or intimidated, but because I did not want to drink. I figure if I use their facilities, the least I can do is spend some money there, unless they just as soon not, which suit me just fine. If I'd have wanted a drink and the only seat was right next to Fat Biker, I'd took it. So when I came out of the ladies' room, I saw Fat Biker had gone to stand outside with 2 of his friends, and I knew what was going to happen. Legally, the bar can't allow him to harass anyone, much less protected classes, so he'd simply gone outside to do it. I go through the door, turn away, start walking, and hear,
"So what do you think of that thing? Trying to go out in public and pretend to be normal."
So I kept walking. Now I own a .38 caliber snub-nosed revolver that fits square in my purse, but I don't carry it because the way I usually oppose public bigotry is to invalidate it by ignoring it. I let it be seen as the archaic belief that it is. I don't believe in werewolves, neither. I'd no sooner carry a gun to protect me from bigots than I'd load it with silver bullets to protect me from werewolves. Now, in a personal situation, I don't just walk away from everything. Jesus said, "Turn the other cheek." And I do that. But I only have two cheeks, and if you slap them both, now you messed with the wrong tranny. I didn't feel much like shopping or lingering in Manitou, and when I got back to my car, I had to wait for a break in the bumper-to-bumper traffic to pull out. Once I got moving, I kicked off my heels, light a cigarette. Traffic's going virtually nowhere. There's pedestrians milling along, parked cars along the curb. So I'm hanging to the left, driving mostly with my brake, and I hear a siren. And a couple cars behind me is a cop with his lights flashing, and people's pulling over. He's passing them one by one, and when he gets to me, he don't pass me. Now, I knew this was not going to be fun because it's easier to change your gender legally in Iran than in the United States of America. I still have a male driver's license because I refused to pay the ticket for 2 psychiatrists plus a court order to certify me as female. You guys laughing is throwing me off. This is the sad part. This cop, he must have seen me walking his street and decided to pull me over on a pretext. He said I was weaving. Here's a lane wide enough for 3 parked cars on a crowned road, and he's pulling me over for weaving at idle speed. Now, I'd already had one bad experience with the police in Colorado Springs. My license plate, the expiration month tag had fallen off, and it was a June tag, and beneath it was July. So in December, beneath it was December, so in July I thought it was still good. When I checked into it later, I found the Colorado DMV had my address wrong. So God had literally set me up for this essential experience. 2 blocks from my house, I get pulled over and detained for displaying a fraudulent license plate. That's a felony. Now, it turned out that they just impounded my car and let me walk home with a court appearance ticket for a misdemeanor that was later dismissed. But it was just me and one lone cop on a very dark street at 2 a.m. He cuffed me and he bent me over the trunk of his car, and he searched me much more roughly and intimately than he needed to. I wasn't wearing a bra, and he couldn't have been hiding nothing there, but he searched very carefully anyway. He even seemed to be checking as to whether my nipples might be glued on. Then he held me down with his hand on the back of my neck, and he pressed his erection beneath his uniform pants against my backside, and he held me that way for about a minute. It felt like he's giving me a taste of what he wanted to see in prison, and he's really enjoying the idea he's going to be the one to put me there. He then manhandled me into the back seat of his car and called for the supervisor, and it was the supervisor that let me walk home. So pulled over now in Manitou, I'm already agitated by the motorcycle guy, and I'm remembering the cop with the rape fantasy. And this Manitou cop, he don't approach the car normally. He does this skulk up and hide behind the door thing with his hand on his gun. And he says,
"Sir, can I see your ID, please?"
Now I passed too well for him to be starting with sir. The previous time and another time when I got a stop sign ticket, the cops had started out treating me like a woman, and they questioned me before asking for my ID, and they was clearly annoyed when they seen it, because to their view I had fooled them. Now this cop, he starts giving me the third degree. Where am I going? Why was I here? What did I do? What stores did I go in? What did I buy? Who did I talk to? Then he starts on drinking.
How much have you had to drink? Are you sure you haven't been drinking? Not even a little? Not even a drop? What about drugs? Use illegal drugs? Have you ever used illegal drugs? What about prescription drugs? Yeah? What kind of prescription drugs do you use? What do you mean it's none of my business? Have you ever been in prison? Have you ever been in jail? Have you ever been in trouble with the law?
On and on and on in the hot Colorado summer sun for 30 entire minutes before he went back to his car. And I may have stumbled a bit on the prescription drug question because I get my hormones illegally over the internet from New Zealand, where they don't require you to have a doctor's note and a court order to be who you are. Liberty and justice for all makes a body proud, don't it? So I'm watching him in my rear view mirror, and he's a-writing, and he's writing furiously, and more writing and writing for another 20 entire minutes before I see in my side view mirror there's another cop creeping up my passenger side blind spot, all crouched over, and he's peering into the back window, and he sees me watching him, and he gets up and he marches right around the front of the car, and he's staring me down. And he comes around over here, and he starts asking me all the same questions. But by his haircut and manner of speech, I'm pretty sure this cop is gay, so after a couple minutes, I interrupt him with, "Can I just take a field sobriety test and get this over with? I'd rather do that than continue to endure this interrogation. I am not impaired at all." And he says, "Well, my partner back there, he's certain that you're on drugs because you're weaving and you're very nervous." He then follows up with one of the most undiscerning statements I have ever heard a human being utter. He says, "You do seem to be way more nervous than a normal person would be in this situation." Normal? I'm a transgender woman in transition who's dressed as a woman, who is a woman, who just got pulled over for no good reason, had to show her mail driver's license to a small town redneck cop who's called her sir. Of course I'm nervous. This is nothing like a normal situation. There's no normal way to act. He says, "I'll go back and talk to him and we'll see if we can get this worked out." So a couple minutes later, the original cop is back at the window asking me if I want to be addressed as Mr. or Ms. But he's still giving me a ticket for not wearing a red-hot black seatbelt on my bare shoulder. When he pulls away, now the gay cop comes back up to the window and says, "Can I give you a piece of advice? Next time you get pulled over, try and relax a little." Now, the most recent time I got pulled over by Colorado cops, I was pretty relaxed, but it wasn't because I had changed my attitude. I had led a protest of my local bar where I had been a regular patron for years until I got involved with another woman who was born a woman who was also a regular there. And somehow our romance ignited a firestorm of controversy that culminated in a horror scene where I was nearly trampled by crazed bigots led by the bar owner's wife while I was covering for my girlfriend to escape her running. And I'd always figured this kind of thing was the price of admission for my life as a woman. It was the flip side of the coin. It was the consequences of my choices and my decisions. But now that it's happened to her, being persecuted for nothing more than being in love with me, I was a little upset. So I organized a boycott of that bar and protests in support of that boycott at unpredictable times over 4 weeks. And I pitted dykes on bikes against the sons of Satan. I turned mothers against their daughters, and I put longtime friends on opposite sides of a narrow sidewalk, screaming hateful things at each other. And it was the kind of scene that ultimately required the attention of Police Commander Brian Grady, who's in charge of the Professional Standards and Training Division for the Colorado Springs Police Department. And the first thing I had to do was convince Commander Grady that just because that bar owner paid to put in new concrete, he don't own the sidewalk. We had several difficult conversations across those weeks, and we came to know and respect each other. And when the protest was winding down because there weren't no patrons wanting to go to that bar no more, I told Brian Grady about the 2 incidents I told you about tonight. And I believe that God helped Brian Grady know that I was telling the truth. And Commander Grady formulated General Order 580 on the treatment of transgender special populations that was signed into effect in November 2010 and subsequently became the model policy in use by law enforcement agencies throughout the state of Colorado. Satori asked me if I was proud of this, and I'm not. I'm humbled. God made me to be the kind of person that'll do what needs to be done, and he plunked me down someplace where something needed doing. It's God bringing change. I'm just one of his tools.
Gina Douglas.